Alex, you have at least achieved a lot. Hello, everybody. So it's George from Ireland. Welcome back to the channel again. And in this video, I'm saying Ave Atquawale to Baroness Betty Boothroyd, who was called to her ward just 2 days ago. But I think it was only reported on Monday, even though she died on Sunday. So she's best known for having Speaker of the House of Commons from 1992 to 2000, the House of Commons being the lower chamber of the British Parliament. And the Speaker's role is chairing the debate, saying whose turn it is to speak, saying when people have to be quiet, sit down, that's enough, please. You mustn't say that, withdraw that remark, expelling people from the House, just generally being in charge of it. And he or she is a non-partisan figure. So Betty Boothroyd was very notable because she's the first woman to have ever held that office. So she's a Labour MP prior to that. The custom is that once somebody is elected Speaker of the House, he or she resigns from his or her party. She was previously a Labour MP, and then she stood for election as Speaker. So the 1992 election, her constituency on her ballot paper description was Speaker, and the convention is that the other parties do not field a candidate against her. Labour, her quantum party, Conservative Unionist Party, the Liberal Democrats, and so forth, they did not put up a candidate against her, though legally they are permitted to do so. The convention has been breached on a number of occasions. For instance, when Sir Michael Martin sat for a Glasgow constituency, the Scottish National Party put up a candidate against him. When Sir John Bercow was Speaker and he sat for Buckingham, the United Kingdom Independence Party put up a candidate against him, the redoubtable Nigel Farage, who memorably crashed at dawn whilst flying a microlight with a UKIP banner in Buckingham in the 2010 election. Didn't manage to unseat Sir John, though. So coming back to Miss Boothroyd, so then she was a crossbench peer to the end of her days. So she's been called to her ward at the age of 93. Now, Baroness Boothroyd, she's born in Dewsbury, a middling-sized town in Yorkshire, and very unusually for 1929, she was an only child. So both her parents worked in a textile mill. So she grew up in a working-class family. They're relatively well off, partly because there was only one child in the family, and they were considered fairly old parents for the time. Her father, who was let me say over 40 when she was born, and her mother was 28. So that was old to be a first-time mother. So she went to state schools. She went to the Dewsbury College of Commerce and Art, and she made her living as a dancer. So she joined a group called the Attila Girls. She danced at the London Palladium, the Celebrated Theatre, and so on. So she was also into acting. She went to a Labour Party youth conference. There was a beauty contest in 1952. She won. Obviously, you'd be howled out of the room for suggesting that anyone should appreciate female beauty or that there's any hierarchy of pulchritude. But in those days, the Labour Party was recognised that the human race is what it is, and that's not something to be denounced. Anyway, so she was a secretary to various famous Labour MPs, notably Barbara Castle, one of the most prominent women Labour MPs of her times, nay Barbara Betts. I've read the autobiographies of both Barbara Castle and indeed the late Baroness Boothroyd. And she lived in the United States for a while, working for John F. Kennedy's presidential campaign, working for a US congressman there. Anyway, she came back to the UK, Betty Boothroyd, living in London. I think her dancing days were done, elected a councillor in Hammersmith, a fairly strong area for Labour. And then she wanted to become a Labour MP. In the 1950s, there were very few women who were MPs, in about 5% of Parliament. So she stood for election 5 times, having lost in Leicester South East, in Peterborough. These were all marginals, Nelson and Cole, Rosendale. And then at the last gasp, she's elected for West Bromwich, a seat in the West Midlands near Birmingham. And in 1973, she won a by-election there. So promotion came fairly rapidly. She was a government whip the following year, as in whip and MPs in charge of party MPs to vote the way the party wants to vote, telling them it's a 1 or a 2 or a 3 whip. So that was actually quite quick to be rising up the cursus honorum. I'm not sure Labour had ever had a a woman as a whip before. And then she was even in the European Parliament, 1975 to 77. Those weren't elected by the people. The UK Parliament elected which people it's going to send to the European Parliament in Strasbourg. So she's fascinated by foreign affairs. She served on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee from its inception in 1979. Anyway, so she's voted onto the Labour National Executive and so on. So with a busy political career, she never found time to marry. Though she was proposed to thrice, she did not become affianced, and she never bore a child. So then she was elected a deputy speaker. Only one woman had been deputy speaker to her, Harvey Anderson, a conservative. Anyway, move in 1992, Betty Boothroyd was elected speaker. It was an election that Labour was widely touted to win, but they narrowly lost, only partly because of Neil Kinnock's notorious behaviour at that Sheffield rally, punching the air, saying, "We're all right, we're all right, we're all right. We better get some talking done here." This premature triumphalism. Actually, Labour probably would have won it, would have probably lost anyway. So Betty Boothroyd, had she not gone for Speaker, it was anticipated she'd have some role in the cabinet. That she actually wasn't in the shadow cabinet at the time. So a really important thing she had to do, I remember in 1993, was the UK Parliament going to pass the social chapter of the Treaty of Maastricht. And it was a tie. The only one time in my lifetime or ever I know that it was an exact tie. So she cast the tie-breaking vote. And the convention was that established by John Evelyn and Denison way back in the 1850s, that in the event of a tie, the Speaker will cast his, or in this case, her vote with the government, which she did. Okay. Anyway, but actually, they done the counting wrong, and the government won by one vote, but won by two because she cast a vote. So she was always urging people to take an interest in politics. And when she became a speaker, she forswore to wear the full bottom wig that they traditionally wore, but she wore traditional robes apart from that. And she was known to not to suffer fools gladly, give people short shrift if they behave badly, and so people who were abusing the forms of the house were cut off with her customary aplomb. So known for her trademark mild Yorkshire tones. Anyway, and she scandalized some when ending Prime Minister's question time by saying time's up. There used to be 2 slots of 15 minutes. When Tony Blair came along, he amalgamated them into 1 slot of half an hour or Wednesday. So in 2000, she surprised everyone by saying that she was going to stand down as a speaker after the summer recess. So then the Prime Minister at the time was Tony Blair. He applauded her, and his encomium to her was saying that she was a national institution. She travelled the world widely. She'd even addressed the Parliament of India and saying there were no imperialists in my family. Shame, shame. Well, there jolly well should have been. Why did they have a parliament at all? Anyway, so John Major, he held her in high regard, and she was actually respected by all sides of the House, which you couldn't say about her immediate successor, Sir Michael Martin. Another point is there's a gentleman's agreement that would alternate between the 2 major parties. So the speakers would go Labour Conservative, Labour Conservative, Labour Conservative, and after her, Labour broke that one by then electing Michael Martin, Labour MP. He resigned from the party as soon as elected. Obviously, Miss Boothroyd was a hard act to follow. Michael Martin intervened on conscious issues. He messed up. There was some sense that he'd abused the expenses and so on, followed by Sir John Bercow. And the end of Bercow's speakership was marred by allegations of partiality towards Labour, him having been former Conservative, but was a Remainer and subsequently emerged, and then he actually joined the Labour Party. So that's her. She was awarded lots of honorary doctorates when she stood down, and she was an honorary fellow of many different organisations. So that's her. She used to go into paragliding. She was a very well-travelled woman. So I can't remember what she died of. So she went into the House of Lords. So she was ennobled as Baroness Boothroyd. So that is her. She will be sorely missed. How I wish I could have met her nearer. Well, thank you very much for watching my channel. Goodbye.